strong that it's got strong winds rushing up into it. But we are watching some cells down into Morgan City, a few cells down into Terrebonne, but they are not that strong at this point. But as we've seen, that could easily change. So we're keeping an eye on all of these, and the one that's really got our attention now is this cell moving into Madisonville. And I tell you what, just looking at the velocity there, Alexandra, the velocity is pretty impressive for this cell that's approaching Madisonville. So if you are in Madisonville, this isn't a tornado warning, but you need to be probably thinking about, if I need to run to my tornado safe spot very quickly, where would I go? Because this is going to be a pretty impressive signature. It's probably a water spout at this point coming off the lake, but could be moving on shore at any second. So no tornado warning, it doesn't look like at the moment, but that could easily change. And then that in turn would put it up into Covington eventually. So that velocity signature is quite impressive for this cell coming off of the lake there into the Madisonville, Mandeville, Covington area. And then we've got all the other tornado warnings that are up on the North Shore, including Franklinton. Franklinton is a spot that still needs to be in its tornado safe spot. The area of rotation is passing right over the community of Franklinton as we speak. I will say it doesn't look terribly strong, but sometimes the radar can miss these things. So treat it as a confirmed tornado right over Franklinton, although I don't have any debris signatures on my radar. These things can wrap up. So be in your tornado safe spot if you are in Franklinton, and that is as we speak at this point. So our tornado warning will continue for Franklinton for right now. As we've been talking about, we have several more hours. I mean, we probably have another 6 or 7 hours of tracking these storms through the region here before we give the all clear. And I'm really watching this cell coming in off the lake. I'm surprised they haven't warned it. I will say back there in the control room, I know I-12 has all those cameras. I don't know if they're up right now. I know they go up and down, but if we do have any cameras along I-12 in the Covington area, that would be great to pull those up. Okay, so we're going to pull a camera up. This is a live view in Covington. I'm guessing we have a crew up here. And we're watching the heavy rain. So this is the leading edge of that supercell that's moving into St. Tammany as we speak. So right now you're going to see rain in Covington. You're going to see maybe some hail in this. Hail's not going to be giant, but maybe some quarter-size hail. But that tornadic part of the storm is still going to be right near the lake. And where this is coming on shore in Madisonville is right at the mouth of the Tchefuncte. And towards that lighthouse area, it looks like. So if you're in Madisonville, if you live along Highway 22, this is moving on shore, and this could very easily be a water spout trying to move inland as a tornado. There's also this cell that's heading up towards the Unitas area in Tangipahoa. You need to be ready to go to your tornado safe spot if a warning is issued. And then we continue to see this cell that is going to be in right over Franklinton. It's currently over Franklinton and now probably moving past that community. I'm going to see if we have any debris signatures with this. Just looking at our debris detector. This is how we tell if debris is being lofted up into the atmosphere. It's not clear. It doesn't look very evident. That's the good news. What you don't want to see is you're watching a graphic like this, and then all of a sudden you see this big old black-blue blob. That tells us that it is a tornado has hit something and it's causing damage. But at this moment, I don't see a clear indication of debris being detected, but not to say it isn't a tight rotation that couldn't drop at any point.
And also, as Peyton was mentioning, we do have our watch issued for the whole area until 8 p.m. That's been something new. So this is not something where, oh, it's a North Shore thing, not for the South Shore. There is a tornado watch now for the South Shore and really our whole area until 8 p.m. And so that means we're going to be here for several hours. Unfortunately, if we still have active warnings, we'll be on air with you, showing you where the tornado warnings are and where you need to get to your safe space if you're in different spots around the area. And then we're also going to be seeing that threat eventually come to an end by the evening and tonight, and we will eventually get the cold air moving in as soon as tonight. It's just this patch of the afternoon into the evening where we're going to be seeing this threat continuing. As we've been saying, the North Shore just littered with all these different warnings. both tornado warnings and a severe thunderstorm warning for that cell that we've been talking about. Looks like we have possibly a new one for a cell in Tangipahoa Parish, and this one is continuing on toward Franklinton. That's that cell we've been tracking across the Tangipahoa Parish area. And we do also have, let me just show you really quickly where the warnings are. If you're just joining us, these warnings, of course, are going up and coming down and going up again, depending on, you know, whether there's still rotation, whether there's still a threat. Huge part of the North Shore. I wonder what percentage of the North Shore or North Shore parishes this is that is covered right now, either in the reds with tornado warnings or the yellows with severe thunderstorm warnings. But as we've been saying, even the yellows, there's enough rotation in the atmosphere that there might be potentially a tornado even with the severe thunderstorm warnings. Also, of course, just the high wind gusts that we could see with some of these cells as they track very slowly edging across our area to the east, and the individual cells are moving off to the northeast. The greens, by the way, if you're wondering what that is, those are flash flood warnings. And really, when the system got stalled up earlier today, there was a lot of rain coming down across this portion of Louisiana into Mississippi. So these are flash flood warnings, and actually Baton Rouge is also under that flash flood warning as well. For Baton Rouge on toward, you know, other surrounding parishes outside of Gonzales, there's been some heavy rain there. So driving around even toward Baton Rouge, please be careful. Hopefully you're not having to drive within the next couple of hours, few hours, because we do have all of these cells out both north and south of Lake Pontchartrain. Excuse me, not south of the lake, but the threat will be there south of the lake. Looking at our radar, you can see the smattering of the not only warnings, but now we're going to put in the actual rain and the actual thunderstorms with the warnings. This one that we were just tracking closely, we had that idea that there might be a water spout, and now moving right over I-12 and very close to Covington, this is the severe thunderstorm warned area. And now we have I-12. This is a live picture of I-12, and you can see traffic still going okay. 190 at 112, and we have lightning showing up even on our camera. Still a lot of traffic. Like, of course, there's always traffic, it seems like, in this part of I-12, but thankfully everything at this point looking okay. If you don't have to get out in this kind of traffic, I really wouldn't. If you can just stay put, maybe grab a little lunch in your building, whatever that might be, instead of going out, I would do that for the next couple of hours at least, especially around the Covington area where this cell is moving right now. And tracking it with our tracker here, these have been moving at roughly 30 miles per hour each cell to the northeast. Going from Covington, where it is right now, off to the northeast, this is your potential timeline. It takes us through the next half hour or so. So if you're in these spots like St. Benedict, Waldheim eventually on toward Isabel and other spots farther to the northeast of Covington, you'll want to really pay attention and just keep us on if you can, because unfortunately we have warnings going on and probably a lot more warnings to come. Look at all these warnings. Greens, flash flood warnings. Reds are tornado warnings. Yellows are severe thunderstorm warnings, which could include a tornado. They can tag it, the National Weather Service, with severe thunderstorm warnings, which typically would include large hail or high winds. They can also tag it to say a tornado potential there or a possible tornado there too. So look at them, all the cells, and this is problematic when you see these individual cells. That's part of why we have this setup where we're seeing these warnings just littered across the North Shore right now. Each of these cells is kind of functioning as its own, thunderstorm. So it's able to tap into the surrounding energy, the warmth that we've seen, and the rotation that's in the atmosphere. Each cell is able to get that. So instead of the nice defined line, not that that would be nice, but sometimes we have these lines moving in with a lot of rain and lightning, but there isn't quite as high a tornado potential when you have it all spread out. Instead, we have all these individual pockets of thunderstorms happening, and each of these is able to rotate. So that's the setup that is allowing all of these warnings to be strewn across our area.
Yeah, thanks, Alexandria. We continue to watch the cells that are moving through portions of St. Tammany Parish, where we've got a crew up here. We are working to get confirmed reports on some damage in St. Tammany Parish. We're trying to get, we'll get a crew up there and see what we've got, but we've also got to drive around portions of these storms. So we've still got a severe thunderstorm warning with a storm that is rotating. There's no tornado warning. warning, but it could wrap up. It's currently sitting, I mean, smack dab right over Covington as we speak. So Covington, you're not under a tornado warning, but I would treat nearly every single one of these storms as getting into the interior portion of a house. It's better safe than sorry. These things can ramp up and they can ramp down fairly quickly. So that's what we are watching. But we are working to get reports confirmed of maybe some damage north of the Covington area from a cell that moved through probably about 30 minutes ago with that initial cell. We still have a couple of other tornado warnings across the area. The next cell we're really keeping an eye on is now crossing into St. Helena Parish and it's going to get into Tangipahoa pretty soon. So if you live in Amite, if you live in any community, Roseland, Tangipahoa, the community, Kentwood, you need to be in your tornado safe spot as this next cell starts to push into your area. And you know, you may have another one after this, so we just got to take each cell at a time. There's also another one that is further back into Livingston Parish. This is going to be right near French Settlement here. This is under a tornado warning as well, and I'm trying to keep all these in line because they're canceling some and they're keeping some, and there's a lot, so we're trying to keep them all together. But if you live in Hammond, you need to be keeping an eye on this. If you live in Springfield, if you live in Albany, Nottolbany, or anywhere in Livingston Parish, you need to be keeping an eye on this cell that's moving through. But the ones that have certainly had our attention are the ones on the North Shore, especially this one that is sitting right over Covington. There's no tornado warning for it, but it is certainly rotating, and as we've seen all morning long, these storms could easily try to spin up. And we did see a confirmed tornado. This was in New Iberia over an hour ago. It did cause damage in portions of New Iberia. That's south of Lafayette and, of course, out of our viewing area. But we know a lot of people out that direction. So we've already had some confirmed tornadoes in the region already this morning. And we're working to get some reports confirmed as to damage on the North Shore. We did have a confirmed tornado at one point. This was going to be up around Unitas. It's since moved past then, but we had a debris signature on our radar, so we could confirm that. That cell is now long gone up towards Franklinton and moving to the north, but there's still multiple cells we are going to be watching as we go through the rest of the afternoon. And here's the deal, this is not going to be one of those events where we have a line of storms that move in and then things are quickly calmer afterwards. This is going to be the next maybe 6 to 7 hours of tracking. This, yeah. Okay, what you're looking at here is 190 and I-12. This is right where that rotation is. And Chris, if you're looking at this too, the darker clouds, the camera quality of these are so bad, but that's definitely a lowering on the right side, isn't it?
Very much so.
It's hard to say, but let's keep an eye on this camera right here. This is going to be the cell that is right where this camera is.
If we can pinpoint exactly where that is on radar, we can see if that's indeed where the rotation is showing up.
Yeah, it's right over
so that's
190.
I-12. If we can figure out exactly where that is.
Oh, it's north of I-12. Okay, so this is on north of I-12.
So along more 190?
I think it's more like 190 because that's 190 that we're looking at there. I don't know the direction we're looking at, but
190 at I-12. Let's see. They don't intersect.
But I can tell you on radar.
If this is near Covington, it certainly looks like yeah, there's a little hook. Nothing. As a matter of fact, if this is indeed the one that we're looking at, this is not currently under a tornado warning in Covington. This is a severe thunderstorm warning. Looking at the velocities of this, yeah, it certainly looks like it could be, as it's starting to move out of our camera range there. Okay, so this would be moving in the direction, folks, from Covington. This is moving toward Abita Springs. For folks in Abita, you need to be in that tornado safe space, as we've been detailing all morning long exactly where that would be in your home, a centrally located room on the first floor, not in a mobile home. You want to be as far away from any exterior walls or windows as possible.
And I figured out where that camera is, Chris. It's right here.
Is that where? Okay.
It's right there. So I'm assuming it's looking up in that lowering right there is what we were seeing.
Yes.
I'm assuming that.
And if we switch over to Max 1 from our director,
yeah,
it's right here. So there does seem to be a little couplet Not necessarily a tornado, but certainly what we could see rotation and certainly a lowering of that cloud base. So you know what, let's just treat this as a possible tornado just for safety reasons and get into that tornado safe space if you're within the area from Covington to Iberia. You just saw Peyton was kind of highlighting exactly where it looks like that camera was. So this is the storm that we're talking about. Currently you see the flashing yellow. It is only under, or you are only under a severe thunderstorm warning at this time. But as we've seen these quickly evolve all morning and now early afternoon long, they quickly transform. You can quickly see that cloud base lowering and perhaps a tornado is on the ground from the Covington to Iberia Springs area. It is kind of a large couplet, so it may be kind of a more larger rotating base of the storm that is starting to lower, but certainly something that, you know what, let's err on the side of caution for folks Covington to Iberia along LA 21, 36, LA 435. So if you're in this area, generally to the east of 190 where it comes south, and I apologize to our producer, I said it didn't look like they ever crossed. This is exactly where they crossed, and this is where that camera was, and this is the storm that we are looking at. And as it was looking more north, it is starting to move out of camera range. So I don't know if it's still within camera range, if we can pull up that traffic camera.
There you go. You see the lowering on the right side? That would be on the east of I-190,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's moving east, so it will continue moving outside of our camera range here shortly, but it certainly looks like, so this again for folks, 190, it is moving to the east now, but it is moving in the direction of Iberia Springs. So for folks in Iberia Springs, as we've been talking about all morning long, we've been highlighting that safest part of your home is far away from exterior walls, no windows, the lowest floor of your home. Just be in that position for right now. These storms have been moving rather quickly. The only thing I'm thinking is, and Peyton, you can check me here, looking at the velocities, it's still a large couplet. So this isn't really one of what we would look for as necessarily signature.
Yeah, and we were talking about, we've been telling people the LI or the slide L radar has been in and out, so we're jumping back and forth. This is what it looks like on the airport radar, which sometimes can be a bit more of a quicker update.
Here,
it's showing similar. It's showing that the couplet's not terribly tight, and I think what we're seeing there is definitely a lowering, but it may not be actually on the ground itself. So definitely a lowering, more than likely a wall cloud with that, but
yes.
It's impossible to tell. And some of these cameras that LDOT has, just the quality isn't good enough to really tell what's going on.
Probably isn't, you know, but why not just err on the side of caution and treat this as it would be. And as we, you know, widen out here, I'm going to switch back over to reflectivity and widen out here. I know just driving in myself, my phone is blowing up, and it is almost impossible to keep straight all of the new warnings that are being issued. So for the folks in on the North Shore, hopefully you're already off the roads. I know coming into work, South Shore between Jefferson Parish and the French Quarter, roadways are backed up. All of the schools have, you know, released at the exact same time. A lot of folks and offices probably closed as well or closing early. So a lot of folks are coming home early. So now all of the roadways are backed up, and that is not where you want to be during a severe weather situation. So, you know, if you are just now picking up your children at school, if you can maybe hang at the building for a little while these storms pass. If you have a break, then that's fine, but you do find that when everyone is leaving at the exact same time, North Shore and South Shore now, you now have the backed up roadways. So just something to keep in mind as a lot of folks are now on the roads picking up their kids from school early, as I think between kind of the 11 to noon time frame is when almost all of the schools decided to close early. Just updating our warnings that are currently in effect for the North Shore. We do have a couple severe thunderstorm warnings from one storm that is in eastern Tangi moving toward Franklinton. That is just gusty wind threat. Also that storm that we have been talking about, it does, you know, have that signature of a little broad hook. And as we were showing you on velocities around the Covington to Iberia, kind of a broad, very large circulation. So certainly that what we would more classify as just the rotation of the entire storm itself, kind of lowering, not necessarily a tornado. And As far as the warnings continue from the National Weather Service, they are not issuing or changing this to a tornado warning, but why not err on the side of caution in Abita, although it is starting to move more north of Abita, so LA 1082, it's moving in that direction. Elsewhere, as we go a little bit farther west around the Florida parishes and Livingston, so west of Killian, we do have a tornado warning. Kind of a smaller warned area within a larger warned area that does include Natalbany toward Hammond and north of Ponchatoula. The storm not there yet, but you're under the tornado warning. And a little farther north, not yet in northern Tangi, but from Montpelier, south of Greensburg, will be moving toward Amite and possibly eventually in the direction of Kentwood. That storm itself right now still north of Montpelier. You can kind of see that actually looks like two. One around Greensburg. Let me use my pointer here. One around the Greensburg area. Well, actually, I can point to it myself. Right here, and then also right here. Again, where you see these yellow or the greens and reds close together, we call that a couplet. That is indicating rotation, not necessarily down to the surface, but certainly a rotating thunderstorm that, just for all intents and purposes, assume that it is a tornado and that it could be moving in the direction of what is labeled Tangipahoa. Amite may stay north of Amite, though, along LA 51 and I-55, and then north toward Kentwood if this storm continues along that path. Elsewhere, we've had a few warnings as well for the river parishes, but it looks like most of those have since kind of springboarded into more the Florida parishes as they continue along this northeastern trajectory. Folks around the metro area are probably wondering, well, what are you talking about? It's been windy, it's been humid, it's been warm, but nothing here yet. And as Peyton alluded to, this is not what I was maybe hoping would be more of just a solid line of storms. Let's put radar into motion here. What we were hoping more is a squall line. Usually with a squall line, your main threats are the strong winds, and any thunderstorms that develop out ahead of that line have the chance of rotation. What you have here now is more cellular, meaning individual storms. Each and every one of those could become a rotating storm with the potential of developing into a tornado. So let's see, a new tornado warning being issued. We can turn on Peyton's microphone.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, here we go. A new tornado warning just been issued. This is going to include mostly Washington Parish here. I got a timeline on it for you. A severe thunderstorm capable of producing a tornado was located. This is about 7 miles northwest of Folsom, and it's moving northeast at 40. It does include the town of Franklinton. I put some numbers on here. Let me switch over my source here. And if you could take this full really quick, I'll let the people see their towns there because it is quite small. So near the Bogachita State Park at about 102, so in the next 10 minutes, this tornadic storm could be near the state park there. Near Richardson at 105, 107 in Franklinton, 113 in Clifton, and then getting a little bit further down the line there towards Thomas, 124, and then the state line community at about 130. So this storm is moving at about 40 miles an hour. And I was looking at earlier, you know, a lot of times down here on southeast, the Gulf South, when we have storm days like this, sometimes these storms will be hauling at 60 miles an hour. Fortunately, we do not have that. These things are moving anywhere between 30 and 40 miles an hour, which is a lot more manageable when you're tracking these things, but they still have a decent movement to them. This one's moving at nearly 40, and that could put it near Franklinton by about 107 to 108 in the next 20 minutes, maybe less than 20 minutes or so. We are watching these things. Some of these supercells have had a history of producing confirmed tornadoes. We did have a confirmed tornado earlier for the new Iberia area, and we had a confirmed tornado really in this same spot with an earlier cell, not this one specifically, but one earlier did have a debris ball that was just to the east of Unitas. So continuing to watch this very closely. So once again, a lot is going on here. If you are watching us in Franklinton, your phones are going off. Go ahead and get in your tornado safe spot. I'm not sure you ever left your tornado safe spot from the first one, so just stay put for now. There is another tornadic cell that is going to be approaching Tangipahoa in the Hammond area. So Hammond, you are currently under a tornado warning right now, and this one is going to be moving northeast at about 40 miles an hour as well. So let me put a track on this one, taking it into Tangipahoa Parish. In Livingston, near Springfield, about 103, Albany 106, VA Hospital closer to Hammond by 111, near Hammond by 115, Tickfaw 117, Independence 121 if it hangs on that long. So that's your timeline on when this worst part of the storm could be entering your community. And that's not when you should take cover. You should take cover right now and wait for us to give you the all clear. But the area of rotation that we're watching getting close to Livingston, or is in Livingston Parish, it looks like it's going to cross very close to Albany and Springfield and Pumpkin Center. If I just named any of those locations and you live in any of those, you do need to be in your tornado safe spot. I have not heard confirmed reports, but that could change at any moment. The atmosphere, it's spinning today, and we see that it's very evident in all of these storms. So if you're in Hammond, if you're in Albany, or anywhere in between there, you need to be in your tornado safe spot. This tornadic part of this storm is going to be nearing the parish line here between Springfield and Albany in the next 5 to 10 minutes. Where I just drew that circle there is where we're seeing that area of spin and that rotation. So that is a tornado warning for Hammond. All right, and what you're looking at here, this is going to be I-55 at 190. Obviously, the storm not quite there. This is going to be north of Hammond, where 190 gets up with I-55. You can see there some rain on the roads there, but try to avoid travel for now. And I'll say, if you live on the North Shore, it's a good idea to not be traveling on the North Shore right now. I mean, things are just too hectic with all this going on. You might be able to squeeze going here and there, but it's just going to be too dangerous. So once again, updating another tornado warning. There's just so many we're watching. There's just so many. Okay, so I will say, watching this, let's go back to this Franklinton, Washington Parish tornado warning too. The velocity signatures have ramped up some, it looks like. Right there on the parish line where you cross into Washington Parish. This is going to be close to the Boguachita State Park, is where this area of rotation is going to pass by as we speak. And just looking at our debris signatures on radar, we want to make sure we're not seeing any debris being depicted on radar, and nothing jumps out on me on this one, but that is a tightening couplet. As we talk about couplets where red and green come together, those are winds going the opposite direction, so rotation in this case. So that's the most impressive cell I see right now, is the one heading into Washington Parish, and then the one following behind is certainly one to watch. That's going to be in approaching the Hammond area in the next 20 minutes, Chris.
Yeah, we're taking a look at this line of storms that or really kind of a broken line of storms that are moving more along a trajectory southwest toward the northeast. So kind of keep that in mind as we're talking about some of these storms. You have to quickly learn your geography of some of these areas where you may be in the track of these storms. As Peyton mentioned, most of them have been moving at about 20, 30 miles per hour as they move along that general axis that is moving through Southeast Louisiana right now, and within each and every one of those individual cells there is the chance of them becoming tornadic. The atmosphere is primed for rotation. You saw earlier that the level for severe weather was increased across much of Southeast Louisiana, really from the metro area across the North Shore and into Mississippi to level 4. That is not something that we tend to see very often in Southeast Louisiana. More common that we would see that north of the state line, but the way the upper system is set up that is bringing us the colder air, we're under a little bit more of a risk of severe weather. And we were kind of anticipating that we would see more of the potential of tornadic storms across the region. Now, thankfully, we have not had too many yet confirmed reports of tornadoes, but the day, unfortunately, is still young, and this will be something we have to contend with for at least the next 6 hours or so, maybe even a little bit beyond that. As you may hear my computer updating with that alert sound, that is any time that the National Weather Service and our chat group issues something that has the word tornado in it. Doesn't necessarily mean it is a warning, and for what you just heard, it is a cancellation of a warning that was for Livingston, St. Helena, and Tangipahoa. I apologize where my computer itself is frozen, so I am having some issues.
You can come to me real fast. Okay, maybe this is better to visualize, Chris, and because we've got so much going on. This is a rotation tracker. It's a tool we can use that just shows clusters of rotation on the map. So let's take this full, if we can, back there in the control room, and I want to show you where our prominent areas of rotation currently are. And if you can look at it with me, there's 3 different areas that stick out to me. There's one that's going to be in the Springfield, near Springfield and Livingston Parish. That's going to be lifting up towards the Hammond area, so you need to be in your tornado safe spot. in Hammond and in Albany, anywhere and around Hammond. The other spot where we have a prominent area of rotation, you can see there that red and green blob is going to be near the Bogue State Park. That's going to be lifting up towards Franklinton and Pine Cliff. So anywhere in between Franklinton and Pine Cliff, we're watching this area of rotation very closely. And keep in mind, you can't see a whole lot up on the North Shore when you get this far north. It's a forest up here, right? These trees are tall. You can't see across the plains, right? So you're not going to see a lot of this heading your direction here. So continue to stay in your tornado safe spot in Franklinton and up into the Jenkins Pine Cliff area. This tornado warning is pretty big. It actually includes areas up towards Thomas and State Line, but we got a little while before it gets close to your locations. But Franklinton, Bogue State Park, Pine Cliff are the immediate areas that we're watching. There's also a pretty good area spin that's north of Impedes Springs near Waldheim. This is going to be lifting to the north and along Highway 21 in St. Tammany Parish, in between Bush and Impedes Springs, or Bush and Covington rather, is where this area of rotation is. So if you're in Sun, Bush, we're keeping an eye on that one. That one's not tornado warned, but as Chris was saying earlier, there's so much going on. Just treat mine not. Just go to the interior part of your house, and better safe than sorry. But the two that jump out to me are certainly the ones that are heading toward Franklinton and the one that's heading towards the Tangipahoa Parish line near Albany and Springfield, eventually towards Hammond. So that is what we're going to be watching over the next 30 minutes or so as these continue to make their way northeast at about 30 to 40 miles per hour. So we still have numerous tornado warnings ongoing, but once again, the two that jump out are the ones for Washington Parish, including Franklinton, and the one in Tangipahoa Parish, including Hammond. Those are where we need you in your tornado safe spot at this exact moment here. And as we've been saying, this is not going to end anytime soon. It's 1 o'clock. We will probably give the all clear closer to 7 or 8 o'clock this evening. And we do have a tornado watch for the entire area that's going to go until 8 o'clock. A really big mess of storms at this point. Radar showing that it's getting pretty messy out there, especially for these cells that are entering Tangipahoa Parish. So we're losing more of these individual discrete cells, and now we're getting these big old rain-making supercells that are going to be hard really to see much of anything other than heavy rain. So you really do have to take these seriously. All right, I want to take a look at the South Shore real quick. Just don't want to forget about the South Shore and make sure we're not tracking anything too wild. Things are looking fairly tame right now. There's a cell that's going to be crossing near Schriever and Gray in Thibodaux. It's doesn't have any strong rotation with it, but we'll keep an eye on it. There's also a little bit of rain moving near Luling and into St. Charles Parish, really through St. Charles Parish. That one doesn't look terribly impressive either, and then there's some back towards Morgan City, but the main ones are certainly going to be still on the North Shore. That's where we are tracking these areas of spin and rotation. So just continue to stay in your tornado safe spot for Hammond and for Franklinton. Those are our two big communities right now that are under a tornado warning, Chris.
And kind of recapping everything that we've been talking about so far, we've had just numerous reports, or excuse me, numerous warnings being issued for the North Shore, but as of yet, the only reports of any severe weather have all been generally to our west. The closest one was from a tornado warning, or excuse me, a confirmed tornado that was on the ground right here. This is northwest of Thibodaux, and kind of getting the details on that one. This was at Donaldsonville. A storm spotter confirmed a tornado that touched down to the west of Donaldsonville. So thus far, we have not had any reports of confirmed tornadoes. But as Peyton has been mentioning, when you do get north of the lake, obviously folks very familiar with the North Shore, is that you've got your communities kind of along and south of 12, and then a whole lot of wooded areas. And it's possible that we've had some tornadoes touch down in the wooded areas, and they may never go confirmed, and not until the Weather Service can actually go out there and maybe bring a drone and start really investigating it, can we confirm whether or not a tornado actually touched down. And you know what? If all of our confirmed tornadoes end up in the wooded areas of, say, northern St. Tammany, Washington Parish, I'm just fine with that, because if we don't have any viewer confirmed tornadoes, then that means anything that did possibly touch down stayed away from all of the populated communities north of the lake. So we are getting, let's see, some new information. The warning that had been in effect for Pike and Walthall, a little north of our area, has expired. We have an expired warning, tornado warning that was for Livingston Parish. So going back to our warned areas right now, And let's see. All right, this is just kind of an update from the National Weather Service. They are watching everything closely, and almost everything is rotating, as we said, and so far all appear to be struggling to produce. That's good news. The low-level wind shear instability is still very high, and the rates at which we're seeing are more severe wind, tornadoes, have not been able to occur yet. Again, we may see kind of an increasing ability for these storms to continue rotating and more of an ability for them to produce tornadoes. So while we have had numerous warnings issued, thus far nothing yet confirmed across our North Shore parishes nor in southern Mississippi. Again, south of the lake, we're not ignoring you, it's just we have not seen the storms there yet. So the good news is where we have had the warnings thus far, nothing confirmed. And what the Weather Service does is they issue these out of an abundance of caution. They look at the environmental conditions where it is possible that we have a tornado on the ground. And what's amazing with radar technology now is that most of what we have seen as far as the warnings go, it is radar indicates a tornado is being produced or is on the ground. There was a time where the only way a warning was issued was that an observer actually spotted it, and sometimes at that point it is too late. So radar has the technology to kind of zone in on certain individual storms. It's able to look at the wind shear, it's able to look at the velocities and see, yes, there is rotation. Doesn't necessarily mean that there is one on the ground, but a warning will then usually be prompted by the National Weather Service, and that is what we have seen so far in the North Shore. So they're mentioning the fact that thus far none of these have produced tornadoes, but the environmental conditions may continue to improve where that is more of a possibility in the coming hours. And in the coming hours, this threat will then start to shift toward the South Shore. So that will be something that we're going to have to watch across the metro area in the coming hours. Right now, that threat has been more for the North Shore. And the two areas, as Peyton mentioned, that we are watching closely is going to be the one that is moving toward the Hammond area right now, as well as this storm moving actually over Franklinton at the moment. So let's put on our velocities here so we can kind of look at what the winds are doing. It does kind of jump out at you, this storm approaching the Franklinton area right now. So as we zoom in a little bit, right along LA 16, kind of getting ready to cross LA 25 toward Franklinton. So this is the area. Again, the quick geography, you are watching a storm that is moving at a trajectory from the southwest toward the northeast. So within this line of trajectory, this is where you need to be using caution and getting into that tornado safe space. We're getting, okay, just another little detailed discussion from the National Weather Service office on these storms. So again, the Franklinton area, this is the storm that you're going to be watching very, very closely for the likelihood, let's say, of a tornado on the ground. The other one, as I've switched over to velocities, that's approaching, not jumping out nearly as much around the Albany, more toward the Natalbany Tickfall. Looks like it'll stay north of Hammond, not really jumping out on velocities nearly as much as the storm that we have around the Franklinton area. So if we are to kind of storm track this out and going, you know, within the next, say, hour or so, 2 hours almost, the Riverside Medical Center at about 1:15, so within the next 10 minutes, and then Franklinton at about 1:20, Pine, Hackley just after 2 o'clock, Thomas Elementary School. I believe most, if not all of the elementary schools, all of the high schools are already closed. The kids have been sent home, and hopefully within the next few minutes or so, most folks are already inside. It'll be around State Line at 2:33, Flowers, Dexter, 2:42 and 2:50, and then the Wesley Ray Elementary School at about 3 o'clock. That's if the storm were to last that long, kind of projecting that one out. So giving you an idea of where it looks like, and kind of looking back at the velocities, let me clear this. It looks like it may be starting to, it's still showing up pretty bright, but maybe some hopeful indications that this one may be starting to weaken a little bit. And as I said, the one that was going to be north of Hammond, not nearly as impressive on velocities, looks like maybe around the Albany area, kind of figuring out where this rotation may be. Looks like right about here, north of 12 along 190, eventually moving toward Natalbany and Tickfaw within the next few minutes or so. So obviously, use caution, get to that safe space. If you're within this corridor from Albany to Natalbany and Tickfaw, just stay in that tornado safe space until this storm has passed through. And then the other one that we've been focusing on is the one that it really jumps out around the Franklinton area for the potential of a tornado on the ground. And updating all of our warnings at the moment. We have flood warnings from the Baton Rouge area at the moment, only 2 active tornado warnings on the North Shore, but as we widen out on our radar here and show you the kind of broken line of storms. As I said, as Peyton said, is now we're getting a little bit more detailed discussion from the National Weather Service, is that each and every one of these individual cells along this kind of quasi line have the potential for rotation and thus have the potential of producing a tornado. So far, that focus has been more from the river parishes as kind of a springboard onto the North Shore Florida parishes, but these are continuing to feed in from the Gulf of Mexico, and as this entire line on the whole moves gradually toward the east, eventually we'll start to see more of our bayou coastal communities and then eventually the South Shore metro area getting on this. Eventually this too will start spreading more across South Mississippi. We were hoping is that maybe the line would just kind of move through without much fanfare, but when it looked more and more like the heightened ingredients were there for tornadic storms, that's when we saw a little bit more confidence in the Storm Prediction Center's forecast of all of our region under a level 3, which we don't typically see. And then just within about the last hour, hour and a half or so, that elevated to a level 4. And that certainly is a more rare occurrence for our area. We typically see those more north of the state line as far as the ingredients for tornadic storms. It looks like just because of the upper system that we're watching that is bringing in the colder air, that focus is a little bit more for us. Okay, we have a update. They are continuing the tornado warning that was for Washington, so that's around the Franklinton area. However, the one Livingston and Entangy that we were talking about in Natalbany, it looks like that may be the all clear, as it didn't really appear on velocity. It was showing up nearly as well. So that warning has expired. So this is the all clear for the folks that were wondering in Tickfaw and Natalbany. This was the all clear, so you can kind of come out of that tornado safe spot, but just be on alert. And really, all of the North Shore, even as you're kind of taking that momentary break and trying to get back to doing what's normal today, just be ready to jump back into that tornado safe space, because these storms quickly evolve. We quickly see the spin up, and then we can quickly see a tornado touch down. So really need to be on more of a heightened sense of alert north of the lake right now into Mississippi. South of the lake, our time will come, unfortunately, where these storms will likely start producing the rotation and tornado warnings. The only area at the moment kind of cleaning up our warnings is the one for Franklinton, really still showing that bright level velocity signature where we could easily have a tornado on the ground. So as far as the communities that are kind of labeled on our map here, Pine would be the next one up as it moves right along, maybe kind of splitting the difference or staying more south of LA 430 and 436. So maybe kind of riding right along LA 436 within the next, say, 15, 20 minutes or so as the storm itself continues moving along at about 40 miles an hour. So continuing that along at about 40 miles an hour. So what I can do is when we scan this out, I can see, I will scan this out and set it to a speed of about 40 miles per hour, and we can kind of get a better read on how long it'll take to reach some of these communities as it continues along. Franklinton High School right about now. Pine at about 123, same for the Pine Junior Senior High School. Thomas and Thomas Elementary School before the half-hour mark. The trajectory of this storm moving at about 40 miles an hour or so toward the northeast. So giving some sense of timing for this storm. A little bit more unpopulated, so indeed if there is a tornado on the ground, it's already passed over the Franklinton community. You know, folks, I got a lot of friends, family on the North Shore and in a lot of these communities. For the folks possibly watching right now, hopefully you're in your safe space. You know my cell number. Text me if you are seeing anything, hearing anything, but again, don't go out and try and capture these images. I'll take your word on what you are seeing or what you are hearing just based on your text. If you got my cell number, let me know what you are seeing in these areas. And again, only if it is safe. Make sure that you are still within your safe space if you're within these warned areas. And again, highlighting or updating the warnings that are being expired because they suddenly pop up and they suddenly come to an end. The storm that we had been tracking moving out of Livingston into southern Tangipahoa around the Natalbany and Tickfaw area, that warning has expired or has been allowed to expire because it looks like the rotation within that storm is no longer there. Looks like maybe a little weak rotation to the south. East of Folsom, no warned area there now, but just something to be mindful of, likely some strong winds between LA 25 and 437. And then, of course, the warned area we've been talking about, moving out of Franklinton right now, moving toward Pine Thomas communities within the next, say, 10 to 15 minutes or so, where that cell will continue. Let's go back to our reflectivity, what you're more accustomed to seeing when we're discussing radar. Each of these storms individual have the possibility of rotation and thus producing a tornado. So while you do get a break, just consider yourself lucky. A lot of St. Tammany under at least a break from the rainfall at the moment. But even what seems to be not a threatening looking cell, a thunderstorm cell, because of the environment that we are under, each and every one of these have the potential of rotation. Thankfully, we've not yet seen that on the South Shore, but let me widen out a little bit here and kind of pan to the south. You know, the storms that we are seeing from Thibodaux to Gray and north of Destrehan right now, looking at the velocities, doesn't look, none of these are rotating, although it's kind of within the range folding area of our radar. But anyway, they are not showing any signs of rotation as of yet. We do also have some flash flood concerns within these individual, or these maybe say more of a quasi band of rain from Donaldsonville up toward Livingston and in the direction of Hammond. Some very heavy rainfall where you're going to get the ditches, the low-lying areas, and likely some street flooding there. If there's any silver lining, is that most of this is not just a constant rain. You do get a break. You get these individual thunderstorm cells that'll move through rather quickly, 20 to 40 miles an hour that we have seen so far. They do move rather quickly, and so you don't get the just constant rain. That would lead to more of a flooding concern across the area. I think the flooding issue is going to be more localized in nature as opposed to a widespread issue across Southeast Louisiana and southern Mississippi. But the individual cells producing those brief heavy downpours, the gusty winds, and obviously the likelihood, or the potential, I should say, of tornadoes is there and will continue to be there. Looking at our high resolution computer model, just to get very rough idea of the timing of these storms. Now, what we really can't do is tell you when you're going to get an individual cell to move over your home. We just can't do that. The computer models are not that good. What we can do is to try and get a rough idea of when this entire broken line of storms will be moving through the area. Now, this is not perfect, just looking at how it is initializing here with where the storms are currently. But to kind of get a rough idea, we will start to see probably over the next hour, hour and a half, more of these cells moving through the metro area, as well as continuing on the North Shore, and also notice starting to spread a little bit more into southern Mississippi. May still have that line of storms from Baton Rouge and the Atchafalaya Basin. Putting this further into motion, we get later into the afternoon, 4 to 5. We start to see maybe more breaks in our western Florida parishes. They would continue across the North Shore. We would have more activity from the metro area down the bayou and continuing into the parts of southern Mississippi. Going further into the latter part of the afternoon and now early evening, maybe about 6 o'clock, we see the bulk of the more severe threat moving away from the metro area. May still have some lingering storms on the North Shore, but a lot of the threat may be more focused southern Mississippi, starting to move into more Mobile's viewing area, as well as down south, some more the Biloxi Marsh into St. Bernard, Upper Plaquemines Parish, Lower Lafourche, and Lower Jefferson as that line after about 6 o'clock. So after dark, it looks like 7 to 8, most, if not all, of the storms are gone, and we will start to see that cooler air moving into the area. So this is not, thankfully, going to be an all-day event, nor is this going to be an issue during the late night hours when folks may be trying to go to bed. Everyone is going to be awake. Everyone is going to be able to hear those alerts and be able to get into that tornado safe space if necessary. But just to kind of give you a rough idea of the timing, so far the metro area has been dry. We will start to see more of that activity within the next, say, hour and a half or so. That's going to continue on the North Shore, and then eventually this line spreading farther to the east, and our weather settling down after about 6 to 7 o'clock. Peyton.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, I wanted to give you an update. We were talking about confirmed tornadoes across the area. The one that we have seen videos of was just outside of our area, and we do have video of it. This was over in New Iberia. This was a couple of hours ago with some of these same cells that's moving across our North Shore. You can see that tornado moving across the area. The New Iberia Hospital and a subdivision were hit by damage from this storm, so they did receive damage. This was reported a couple of hours ago, and you can see the video there, and there was quite a bit of impressive video coming out of the New Iberia area with this tornado about an hour and a half, maybe about 2 hours ago. At this point, at that time, the New Iberia police were reporting that the tornado touched down in the Southport subdivision, if you're familiar with that area, and it had damaged several homes. So we're still waiting to get some updates on that, but we did have a confirmed tornado a little over nearly 2 hours ago, confirmed in the New Iberia area, and those are some of the same cells that are currently moving into portions of the North Shore. But as you said earlier, looking at these storms, they really are struggling. Now, we've still got several more hours to get through. I was looking at the dynamics in the atmosphere. It's still plenty conducive for rotating storms all the way through the afternoon, and we may still see some of the best environment move in. So we still got a ways to go with this, and we're watching it closely. But right now, a lot of these storms do seem to be struggling. I was looking at all of velocities across the region, and the only one that was really sticking out that was wrapped up was that one that's now past Franklinton, but it looks like it's maybe still weakening. And then there's a couple of areas of rotation that we're still tracking, but at the moment, the only tornado warning that we had was, or still had, is that northern Washington Parish one, but the rest look to be doing okay at this point. The other part, as you were mentioning, very heavy rainfall. We'll be watching for some flooding. I know St. Tammany Parish schools were releasing an hour early. As I mentioned earlier, just be very, very careful with that because they could put you out into some of these storms going to pick up some of those kiddos. So just be careful. Make sure you're checking in. Don't just go out there blindly getting on the roads with another storm inbound, because we do still have several more hours, maybe 4 or 5 more hours to track these storms through the area before things do calm down. Our tornado watch for the entire area, it goes until 8 o'clock, but as Chris mentioned, by tonight we'll be doing a lot better, seeing improvements, and we finally get that cold air. But we still have a ways to go with this, Chris, as we track all these storms.
Storms, and as you were saying, we were looking at, I was doing the same thing, kind of looking at the upper atmosphere and looking at all the ingredients for severe weather, for tornadic type storms, and what can be very frustrating of forecasting severe weather in Southeast Louisiana, really along the Gulf Coast. You can have all of the ingredients there. You could have every indicator screaming at you that this is going to be a busy tornadic day, and it just doesn't always come together, which that would be a blessing if it ends up being the case as we continue for the next several hours. And that certainly could be the case, but it also could be the opposite, that we see more tornadic development as these storms continue through Southeast Louisiana. But as I said, even as all of the ingredients may be there, it is very difficult in Southeast Louisiana, really along the northern Gulf Coast, for tornadic storms to develop. It's just the environment, the marine environment that we are under, that we typically don't see. And so when everything screams at us that, yes, you will see it, we go and have to err on that side of caution when all the indicators are there. But it is also, as Peyton said, we've not really yet seen any of these thunderstorms produce, and that is a good thing. That is what we would hope to see. Now, certainly gusty winds. I mean, boy, the winds are whipping even away from these storms, so we will likely see more, hopefully just minor wind damage within these storms moving on through. But what is more frustrating is that the more cellular nature of this kind of quasi line, because it is not just a perfect squall line moving through. You tend to get more of the gusty wind damage more than anything else. And then if you do see a few rogue storms out ahead of that line, they can produce some rotation, or they can rotate and maybe produce a tornado. And that is typically the type of severe weather that we see this far south. It's usually more of a squall line with a front, and then out ahead of it, a few individual storms that could produce a tornado, or at least produce some rotation where you get the gusty winds and the possibility of a tornado. But this situation, just based on the upper system that is bringing in the colder air, we knew this was going to be a more vigorous upper system, and as it looked like more the dynamics farther south for the potential of tornadoes, and that is still going to be present throughout the rest of the afternoon. So consider yourself lucky if you get one of these thunderstorms to move on through, and maybe it was tornado warm, but it did not actually produce a tornado. To me, that is a blessing as opposed to a bad forecast, because the ingredients are still there and will continue through the rest of the afternoon and into the early evening hours as this line continues to progress very slowly toward the east. But once it is clear, after about 7, 8, 9 o'clock or so tonight, the storms will be moving to our east, and thus we will start to have a break from not only the storms but also the warm and humid air that is allowing for the fueling of these storms, and that will start to break down. Yes, this is perfect. This is the tornado potential, and to not get into too many details of what this is, this looks at various indicators of the potential of tornadoes, and this is higher for Southeast Louisiana. Typically, we would see maybe the grays converging toward a yellow as more of our threat for tornadic storms, and then we usually see that bullseye more over central Mississippi. But when you start to get to that low to medium, maybe high range in Southeast Louisiana, that is telling. And that is exactly what we've been looking at for a potential. Now notice, as we go into the mid-afternoon hours after 4 o'clock, you notice that even if we still do have some storms maybe just to the west of this line, the ingredients for tornadic storms would already be farther to the east. So you can kind of keep this graphic in mind as for the timing as to when the severe threat may be winding down. And it looks like by 6, even if we still do have maybe some rain, some thunderstorms around, by 6 o'clock, most of the ingredients for tornadic storms is already moving to our coastal parishes, Biloxi Marsh, Central, Lower Plaquemines Parish, and then Mississippi. After about 7, even if we still do have some rainfall around, it looks like the severe threat will be gone at that point. So the good news is, even if we still have some rainfall after about 6, 7 o'clock, it appears as though the ingredients for tornadoes will already be to the east of us. So I would say for the next 5, 6 hours, say, we're going to be under the gun from any of these storms, because the ingredients are still there for tornadic storms, that any of the thunderstorms that we see, any of the individual cells kind of within that line, have the chance of rotating and producing a tornado. We have not yet seen that threat over the metro area. It's been more focused on the North Shore, because while the ingredients are there, as of yet we don't really have the thunderstorms on the South Shore, but that is coming, and we'll be watching that steadily through, unfortunately, the next several hours. But again, it looks like the night and overnight we'll be settling down and finally getting into a more December-like pattern. Peyton.
And Chris, we were just talking about the potential later on. The Storm Prediction Center, they're the experts. They're like the National Hurricane Center, but for severe storms. They just released a mesoscale discussion, so a discussion on what's happening, and it is really telling them what we were just talking about. We're far from done with just staying weather aware. Now, it's impossible to tell you what exactly is going to happen, but their main portion of this storm system with the strong wind shear, the wind shear that can create stronger tornadoes, is just now moving into the area. And they were talking about that recent data showing across the area shows the lower layers of the atmosphere that the wind shear is continuing to increase, and that can mean we could still see some not only tornadoes but perhaps a strong tornado here and there. And you know, that's not something we often talk about down here on the Gulf Coast, especially the South Shore. And when you start to talk about strong tornadoes, you're talking about anything EF2 or greater. Those are the tornadoes that can do a lot of damage. They all do damage, but EF2s and greaters are where you start to see a lot of damage. The environment, it is conducive. Now, a lot of things have to come together for a strong tornado to form, but we certainly have have one of those components as we go through the rest of this afternoon, and that is being the low-level wind shear. We always talk about wind shear in hurricane season, how hurricanes don't lack wind shear. Well, severe thunderstorms love wind shear, and that's how they feed themselves. That's how they survive. So as that stronger shear is moving in over the next several hours, we are far from done. Now, fortunately, those cells on the North Shore, they have struggled quite a bit. There's been some prominent areas of spin, but we have not seen anything that's dropped and stayed on the ground for a long time. That's great. But we still got a little ways to get through here at 1:30. Once again, our tornado watch is going to go till 8. And just looking at our latest graphic here, by probably 6 o'clock, I think we're going to be doing okay across at least Southeast Louisiana. But we do have several more hours of this to track, and the Storm Prediction Center, and I'm telling you, these people know what they're doing. They're seeing the same thing we're seeing. They're seeing that corridor of strong low-level winds. That wind shear is just now getting to the area. So it'll be interesting, Chris, to see what do these storms do. What do these storms do on the southern edge of this line that's down in Thibodaux and maybe coming to the South Shore? What do they do? We will be keeping an eye on them very closely over the next couple of hours. Once again, you just got to have your tornado safety plan just in case you do need it. Lily, you got some information for us?
Yes, Peyton, we do. We want to get out to Mike McDaniel, who has been on the North Shore for us all day. And Mike McDaniel, he is now between Folsom and Franklinton. Mike, what are you seeing out there right now?
Hey there, yeah, so just to kind of give you a better idea of where we are, we're a little northwest of Folsom, a little southwest of Franklinton, right along Highway 450. That's Highway 450 you see there in the background. We kind of, you know, it's raining for sure. You can hear the thunder, you can hear the lightning. We're kind of caught right in between those two cells that our meteorologists have been tracking for most of the day. So we know another large round is going to be coming out here. We kind of trekked over this way because we wanted to see if we can try to find maybe some debris or some type of confirmation that a tornado actually did touch down up here, because I know that we were tracking that a little bit earlier. So we kind of started out just north of, you know, Unitas, around Global Wildlife, because that seemed to be where some of the talk was. We drove around a little bit, didn't see anything. We did see some other cars kind of out and around, but I did get off the phone with a parish representative just a few minutes ago. He told me that as of now, there are no reports or any indication that there is any type of tornado damage here in St. Tammany Parish up where we are. He said that there are emergency crews out, you have deputies out, you have firemen out, kind of seeing if they can find anything. But so far, they haven't been able to either. This is a very rural area. There's just lots of open space, lots of land. There are forests everywhere you go. Not a lot of houses. The ones that are out here kind of around us have a lot of space in between them. So that kind of gives you a lay of the land where we are right now. We started out over in Tangipahoa Parish. We spoke with the parish president over there, and of course he says, you know, what we all say and what we all see is that, you know, when it comes to tornadoes, you can't really predict where they're going to drop down. So it's always important to stay aware, watch the weather, make sure you're listening to any type of warnings. If you hear sirens, make sure you get to that safe space. And just as we started talking out here, the rain is starting to pick up a little bit, so it seems like maybe those cells are getting a little bit closer to us. Of course, a lot of folks in this area, we haven't seen anybody out in yards, so to speak. We have seen, you know, just some traffic here and there. We've passed, you know, a utility truck along the way. That's kind of been the most of it where we are, right just northwest of Folsom, west of Folsom, kind of south of Franklinton, southwest of Franklinton, right in that area, right on the edge of like St. Tammany, Washington Parish, those lines right there. So that's some good news that we have heard, that there have been no reports of any confirmed damage yet here in St. Tammany Parish as to that potential tornado that confirmed tornado that was being tracked a little bit earlier in the day, I believe the first one in this area. So we'll be out and about. We're going to keep trekking maybe a little bit north, wherever the weather takes us. We're going to kind of hold up for just a little bit, let one of these cells pass just to kind of see what happens. But right now, along Highway 450, just kind of waiting it out as the rain kind of comes down. We'll send it back to you guys in New Orleans.
All right, thank you so much, Mike. We're going to get back over to Peyton with the latest on these storms.
Thank you, Lily. Yeah, we continue to track our strong storms. The good news is, me and Chris were just talking here about what's going on across the region. We no longer have any active tornado warnings. Now, they're still spinning. Nothing is strong enough to produce a tornado at this exact moment. So that's the good news. But however, we still need to stay weather aware. We have many more hours of this ongoing across the region. You can see a wide view of what's going on. The storms are starting to get closer to the river parishes, and really like Thibodaux, Upper Lafourche, Upper Terrebonne. We do need to keep an eye on those cells. None of them are aggressive enough looking to warrant a warning, but we will be watching all these closely. As we've been talking about, the strong wind shear that produces these supercells and tornadoes is still moving through the area. So just kind of a standby game here as we track these things, as we watch and make sure that none of them try to rotate too much. The latest warning we did have was for the cell that moved over Franklinton. It's now moved into southwest Mississippi up into I believe that's Marion County, and it looks like it's weakened quite a bit. There are some areas of spin. There's an area of spin passing right near Folsom. It does look broad. It may produce some gusty winds, but it doesn't look like it's tight enough to produce a tornado at this exact moment. But you might see a lowering with these. These are certainly probably producing wall clouds. Those are the areas of lowering at the base of the storms here, and sometimes they will be rotating. That's the genesis or the beginning of a tornado sometimes. So those you might see and might look concerning. So we'll be watching all that. But at the moment, nothing is severe warned, nothing is tornado warned, but we certainly have the heavy rain, Chris. And we were talking the past couple of days about, you know, kind of a secondary risk behind the tornadoes was that flooding risk, just because, well, it floods really easily down here. And we do have a couple flash flood warnings where we've seen that persistent heavy rain. The areas that have been getting the heavy rain over the past couple of hours is around Tangipahoa Parish and into Washington. So those are the spots that's really been getting the heavy rain at this moment. Here in the metro, I'm not sure we picked up a drop of rain yet. That will likely change in the coming hours as we see these storms get a little bit closer. Chris?
Yeah, as Peyton said, currently not under any warnings at the moment as far as tornadic storms. We do have the flood warnings a little bit more to our west, but something else we had talked about was what the Storm Prediction Center will issue as a meso discussion. What that means is they'll highlight an area where they are discussing the potential for severe weather. Now, it's not necessarily a watch. It's a little different. It's just more of a detailed discussion. And what they did was what we saw earlier. This is the meso discussions. This is not the watch. This is not the tornado watch. This is the discussion area. And earlier, the discussion area was more from the river parishes, Florida parishes, and north as far as the potential for severe weather, tornadic storms within the next several hours. Well, a new one was issued, and it was issued farther south. So that's farther south down the bayou and the metro area now included. So what they're saying is that we are starting to see that window of potential shift a little bit more down to the south as the line continues moving to the east. So while we are still watching the North Shore and Mississippi, that threat level has increased for the metro area. Not that there is anything there at the moment, but all of the ingredients are in place for these storms to not only rotate, we've already seen that most of them do rotate, but also lower enough that, as Peyton said, you'll see that wall cloud and then potentially a tornado touching down as well. At the moment, we'll switch back over to just reflectivity with our warnings on. We don't have anything at the moment, but that could quickly change. And as we have seen steadily this afternoon, morning and afternoon, is that they do quickly evolve. So that threat is now starting to move onto toward the metro area. Right now it's more the river parishes down the bayou and offshore. This moisture is still getting fed in ahead of our front, and that will continue to be a threat for the next several hours. So more storms, and that threat level continues for the North Shore, and we'll now start to see maybe a heightened risk where you really start needing to pay attention across the metro area. We do have other stories to get to, and Lily Cummings has those.
Chris, thank you so much. We want to get you to a developing story out of Mississippi. The Bay St. Louis Police Department are investigating the death of 2 of their own after they were shot and killed early this morning. Leah McNeil joins us now from the scene with the latest.
It's really a tragic situation that unfolded here earlier this morning. 3 people are now dead, including 2 Bay St. Louis police officers and the suspect. The crime scene tape and the dozens of law enforcement officers have since cleared the scene, but the pain this small, tight-knit community will be feeling after this incredible loss will be here for years to come. So far, law enforcement says the 2 officers responded to a call for service at the Motel 6 on Highway 90 in Hancock County at 4:30 this morning. After getting here on scene, both of the officers were shot. We're told the suspect turned the gun on herself too. She was pronounced dead at the scene, and so was one of those officers. The other one was transported to a local hospital where they died. Now, I did speak to one area retired firefighter. He says the law enforcement community here is small, so everyone knows everyone. He says his heart breaks for the officers and their families.
It's devastating like it is at any other time. You know, you got 3 people here lost. These police officers, they're doing the right thing by helping people. They need help. Just because they wear a pistol and a badge, you know, that things happen. And my heart goes out to them.
Now, the mayor here has ordered flags to have staff out of respect of those 2 officers who lost their lives this morning in the line of duty. The Mississippi Bureau of Investigations is spearheading this case. In Bay St. Louis, Leah McNeil, Eyewitness News.
Bay St. Louis Police Chief Toby Schwartz has identified the victims as Sergeant Stephen Robin and Officer Brandon Estorff. We'll get back over to Chris with more on weather.
All right, thank you, Lily. Yeah, and this is kind of our lull at the moment where we do not have any active severe warnings, so no severe thunderstorm nor tornado warnings, but that could quickly change as we continue through the next several hours. Again, the kind of really closely monitor type scenario for the North Shore will continue. Haven't been there yet for the South Shore, but that will change as storms from the river parishes beyond west will start moving in our direction down the bayou. They are continuing. Again, this is not really a solid line of storms, but more of a line made up of individual cells, each and every one of which have been showing signs of rotation, weak, some stronger, and all have the potential of producing tornadoes. We have, at least on my unofficial count, had about 14 warnings issued. Thankfully, nothing yet confirmed. There was one that was a confirmed based on what we could see on radar, but nothing that was observed on the ground. So thankfully, that has not yet been the case. But before we kind of wrap up here, I just want to kind of look at these individual storms themselves, and while they may not jump out as the hook echo type textbook example on reflectivity, what you're more accustomed to seeing, when we switch over to velocities, we can see if any of these are really showing signs of rotation. The one that kind of had my eye was the one that was over the western and northern part of Lake Pontchartrain, because sometimes these little water spouts can quickly move on land. Doesn't look like there's any rotation there. Nothing really jumping out across the North Shore, and thus far what we do see in the river parishes down the bayou toward the coast, nothing jumping out at me. What you see in this purple kind of is makes it a little bit more difficult to see what's actually happening beyond it without getting too technical. And so nothing really at the moment jumping out at us as far as a threat for an immediate threat for a tornado, at least at the moment. As we said, this has been a very quickly evolving situation and something that we're going to be on top of throughout the rest of the afternoon and into the early evening. We will, of course, cut into programming if necessary and stay on the air as long as we need to, as long as there is a threat on the ground. We are going to be here with you and taking you through that. So far, the threat has been more on the North Shore. That threat will continue, and we'll start to see the threat focus more now than, or shift, I should say, more south of the lake and down the bayou parishes. Thank you to Peyton Malone and Alexandra Cranford for covering this through the afternoon. Myself, and hopefully Peyton can go home and get some sleep, myself and Michelle Morgan, as well as Alexandra, will continue to cover this through the rest of the afternoon and evening. Of course, you can get all the latest on our Facebook page, social media, and our website, wwltv.com, as well as downloading the app to make sure that you're getting those alerts as soon as they occur. And of course, if there is anything that happens, we're going to be on the air and likely live streaming that as well on our social media platform. So for now, I'm Chief Meteorologist Chris Franklin. Keep it here to Channel 4 for the rest of the day as we continue to monitor the severe weather threat until about 7 to 8 o'clock this evening.
From Channel 4's on.
Wondering what actually goes into your multivitamin? At New Chapter, it's innovation, organic ingredients, and fermentation.
Fermentation?
Yes, formulated to help your body really, truly absorb the natural goodness. New Chapter, wellness well done.
Trelegy for COPD.
Birds flying high, you know how I feel. Breeze drifting on by, you know.
If you're tired of staring down your COPD,
It's a new dawn, it's a new day,
stop settling.
and I'm feeling good.
Start a new day with Trelegy. No once daily COPD medicine has the power to treat COPD in as many ways as Trelegy. With 3 medicines in 1 inhaler, Trelegy makes breathing easier for. From Channel 4's Eyewitness News, this is your local weather expert, Alert, brought to you by Egan Insurance Agency.
All right, and good afternoon, Chief Meteorologist Chris Franklin here. We do have a new tornado warning that is in effect for Laplace. This is an area that we had been watching what we call a couplet, where you see the reds and the greens, where we show the winds.